In the History of the World, Part 1, Mel Brooks plays the King of France. And he has this recurring line throughout that entire segment as he is fawned upon and served by others. He says, "It's good to be the king." This morning, I want us to consider that it's good to be a saint. There was a column in the New York Times on Wednesday, October 28, 1992, by Robertson Davies, titled "Haunted by Halloween." After tracing the origins of Halloween to the ancient Celtic festival of the death of the year, and showing how the Christian church had piggybacked the Feast of All Saints onto the pagan festival, which marked both the death of the sun and the beginning of winter, and the remembrance of their dead ancestors, Davies argued for a recovery of the best part of the ancient Halloween, the remembrance of the dead. Let's recognize that we are not the ultimate triumph, but rather beads on a string. He writes, "Let us behave with decency to the beads that were strung before us, and hope modestly that the beads that come after us will not hold us of no account because we are dead." What might we profitably do with Halloween? Look backward, first of all, and consider those who went before us. The road ahead is inevitably dark, but to see where we have been may offer unexpected hints about who we are and where we should be heading. Triviality about the past leads to triviality toward the future. John Wesley, the 18th century founder of Methodism, said that the Feast of All Saints was one of his favorite festivals of the church year. It was the one time, more than at any other, when the great chain of witness from the earliest worshipers of God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, was emphasized and brought into the present through remembrance. I think it's my favorite too. On All Saints Sunday, more than any other time of the year, I feel surrounded by the presence of that great cloud of witnesses. The wonderful and magnificent passage that we heard so beautifully read from the book of Revelation this morning, our first reading, and which some of us can never hear without wanting to sing it, as Handel set it to music in the Messiah, is a passage of remembrance of the heroic witnesses to the faith. Psychologists today tell us that our memories are what form our identity. Events and people that don't stick in our memories really don't influence us that much at all. However, the things and people that we remember have the power to shape us and mold us and direct us, even long after they're past and gone. Even when those memories are buried deeply in our subconscious or our unconscious mind. To a large extent, I guess we could say we are what we remember. And I don't mean primarily here the kind of remembering that we do when we're, for example, cramming for an exam, and we try to make the dates and times and equations stick in our heads long enough to regurgitate it for the professor. Or the kind of remembering we do when our partner says, "Honey, don't forget to stop for milk on your way home." I'm speaking here of remembering in a much deeper sense. The story is told of a Methodist pastor who had lunch with an Episcopal priest with whom he had gone to college some 25 years earlier. and whom he hadn't seen or kept in touch with all those years. They didn't talk about anything serious. They just remembered together. Through their memories, they relived their college days. Names of significant people came up. And with their names came faces and voices and a reaffirmation of what those people had meant to them, for good or for ill. And with that remembrance of things past came a deeper level of understanding of who they were now compared to who they were back then. We've all probably had similar experiences. And the strange thing is that when we do this kind of significant remembering of people in the past who've had important influences on us, we begin to get a sense of our place in the world. We begin to get a glimpse also, at least a hint, of where we might be headed. In short, memory leads to hope. And that's what's happening in this passage from Revelation this morning. Bless you. The seer is writing to 7 congregations in Asia Minor, somewhere between the end of the 1st century and the beginning of the 2nd. In the 50 or 60 years since Jesus had been crucified, the new movement who believed that he had been raised from the dead had spread significantly over the whole Roman Empire, as far west as Gaul, or what is now France and Spain. Christians made up a significant block of the population and were recognized, potentially at least, as a powerful political force. Now, this made the Emperor Domitian a bit nervous and edgy. And to make sure that he was able to hold the empire together, large and unwieldy as it was, he instituted a kind of Pledge of Allegiance. Now, this was not the kind of Pledge of Allegiance that we have. It's similar in intent, but with much more serious repercussions. In Domitian's version, subject peoples as well as Roman citizens were required to offer, once a year in the temples of the state religion, a sacrifice to the divine genius of the emperor. Failure to do so constituted treason, which could be punishable by imprisonment, exile, or even death. Now, Domitian didn't really believe that he was divine. The doctrine of the emperor's divinity was a political doctrine. If the emperor was descended from the gods, then his rule was legitimized beyond all question. And since most of the Christians were cosmopolitan peoples of the Greco-Roman world, the emperor figured he could ensure their loyalty by making them say this Pledge of Allegiance. Was he ever in for a surprise? First of all, he discovered that these Christians were as devoted to the worship of their god, Christus, as the Jews were ever to theirs. But when they were threatened with exile or even death for refusing to take the oath of loyalty, these Christians reacted in a very surprising way. They didn't revolt or use their numbers to create political instability by preaching insurrection. Instead, they willingly walked to the stake to be burned, or into the arenas where the lions waited, all the while singing praises to God and speaking words of forgiveness to their persecutors. They became martyrs. The word martyr, literally translated, means witness. Their witness to their faith in Christ was so strong, so potent, that they willingly went to their deaths rather than compromise with a state which they believed was making illegitimate demands upon them. And so, to these Christians who were living through a time of great ordeal, John, one of their pastors who had been exiled to a penal colony on the Aegean Sea, wrote this visionary letter to them. By adopting this visionary style of literature, he invites them to use their imaginations, to glimpse a different reality above and beyond the grim time of testing which confronts them on an almost